a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. A new proposal. Iran has reportedly offered the US a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Official talks still at a stalemate. Clearing the path, Senator Thom Tillis drops his blockade of Kevin Warsh's confirmation for Fed chair. And a busy week of central bank decisions ahead, and more than $28 trillion in US market cap set to report earnings. So let's get a check on the markets around the world now. Winnie Su is in Hong Kong for the latest from Asia. Winnie.
Good morning, Bonnie. It is a very strong start of the week for Asian stocks, and we are looking at the MSCI Asia here up more than 1%, which is taking us to about 1% away from hitting fresh records. And we do have the Kospi rising 2%, as well as the Nikkei 225 making fresh a record above that 60,000 level for the first time. It is, in fact, Asia's busiest earnings week for this quarter. But also, you just mentioned we're very busy with central bank decisions, including that of the Bank of Japan coming tomorrow. As you take a look at where the Japanese yen is trading, right above that 160 level against the dollar, which is very close to that intervention level that we watch very closely. And looking at how it has weakened about 12% in the past year, we will be very keenly watching out for the tone from tomorrow's presser. For now, we are expecting a hold from the Bank of Japan.
Winnie, thank you so much. That's Winnie Su there. Let's get over now to London, 2 hours into the European Open. Here's Justina Lee. Justina.
Good morning, Bonnie. Here in Europe, Euro Stoxx 600 is kind of struggling to kind of cling on to a small gain here. Now, there seems to be a bit of a risk-on mood kind of in currencies, with the euro rising and generally kind of reflecting the broader declines in the dollar. And now, of course, the attention is still all on the oil. So we're generally seeing short-end bond yields still climbing, and especially for UK gilts. And that is something that the Bank of England will have to grapple with this week when they meet and discuss various scenarios for a longer crude prices for longer.
Justina, thank you so much. Justina Lee there in London. And as Justina said, oil prices are going to be in focus with all of those central bank meetings this week, and another day of gains for Brent and WTI. We're above 107, close to 108 now on Brent, and above 96 on WTI. Goldman Sachs raising its forecast for the fourth quarter now, saying $90 will be the average. Morgan Stanley already had its fourth quarter forecast at $90 on average for a barrel of Brent. That's $30 in the case of Goldman, higher than what the forecast was before the Strait of Hormuz got blocked. The two-year yield down a little bit. We're at 3.78. Not much movement today, but there has been some bull steepening now that maybe the blockade of Kevin Warsh's nomination is out of the way. Let's take a look at futures. A little bit of a mixed picture this Monday morning. We're seeing S&P futures just slightly pointed lower. NASDAQ futures trying to get into the green. The dollar index is down about 0.25%. And I do want to point to the VIX, rising once again this morning. It is above 19 right now. All right, let's get to some individual movers. Here's Chloe Melly. Chloe.
Good morning, Bonnie. Let's start with some M&A. Sun Pharma is buying the women's healthcare company Organon in a $12 billion deal. So for Sun Pharma, this is really going to expand its global reach and boost its ambitions of becoming a major player in innovative therapies. And for Organon, we're seeing that really boost the stock this morning, up almost 15%. Moving on to Qualcomm, which is moving higher on a report that OpenAI is considering collaborating with the company alongside others to develop an AI-first mobile phone. There's also general enthusiasm around this tech AI sector, and therefore we are up more than 10% actually this morning. And finally, GE Vernova is down after the company was downgraded by BNP Paribas because of capacity in the gas turbine industry, saying that the growth momentum is likely to slow, will be harder to sustain, and therefore we are down on the back of that downgrade about 1.8% for GE Vernova.
Chloe, thank you so much. That's Chloe Melly there in London. She'll be back later in the hour. Also coming up this hour, we'll push ahead to the major central bank decisions with Mark McCormick of BMO Capital Markets and Isabelle Mateos Lago of BNP Paribas. But first, Iran signals it would accept an interim deal with the US, this according to Axios. Tehran reopening the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for the end of the blockade of Iranian ports. Now, the US hasn't commented on the reported plan. Joining us now from Dubai is Jumana Bersechi. What else is in this plan, Jumana? What kind of detail do we have?
Well, it's important to remind everybody that this came on the back of a whirlwind trip that the Iranian foreign minister has conducted over the course of the weekend. Of course, he was in Islamabad, and on Friday we thought maybe the U.S. envoys would also be participating as well. That was called off. But what we do know is that there has been a really big diplomatic push out of the Pakistani mediators, with Oman as well, with the Iranian foreign minister heading to Oman. And then this morning, a couple of hours ago, he also arrived in Russia too. But from what we understand, the Iranian side have set forward their wish list of what they would like to see in order for the negotiations to proceed. And to be clear, this is a wish list that is coming through from the Iranian side. And some of the items, as per reported, not just by Axios, but also Iranian state media as well, include a new legal framework for Hormuz, lifting the blockade, compensation for damage, and guarantees against further military action. Clearly, some of those are non-starters, specifically as it pertains to a new protocol around the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Axios are reporting that later today there will be a Situation Room meeting taking place with the president alongside some of his key national security advisors as well. Perhaps they will deliver a response to this counter-proposal that is coming through from Iran. But at the same time, President Trump had a conversation with Fox yesterday where he described the U.S. naval blockade as going well, and that in a couple of days' time, what you're going to see is Iranian storage capacity reaching their limits, after which it's going to become very difficult for them to get their oil out. And therefore, the thinking from the U.S. part is the longer their U.S. naval blockade goes on for, the more Iran is going to hurt and the more they'll be incentivized to bring concessions to the table when the two sides do eventually meet. So at this point, it is still very much a stalemate between the two sides. We now have a counter-proposal from Iran. The ball is in the U.S.'s court to come back on what they would like to see in order to proceed to the second round.
All right, Jumana, thank you so much. Jumana Bersachi there in Dubai. In Washington, D.C., President Trump speaks out on the attack over the weekend at the White House Correspondents Dinner.
Well, what happened is it was a little bit me. I wanted to see what was happening, and I wasn't making it that easy for him. I wanted to see what was going on. And by that time, we started to realize maybe it was a bad problem, different kind of a problem, bad one, and different than what would be normal noise from a ballroom, which you hear all the time. And I was surrounded by great people.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall joins us now from Washington. Tyler, give us the latest on the assailant and what's happening.
Hey, Vani. Well, at this point, the investigation is still in its beginning stages, though preliminary evidence does suggest that the suspect was indeed targeting senior Trump administration officials. And a manifesto reviewed by Bloomberg News does show that the suspect did call President Trump a, quote, traitor. Now, we're learning a few additional details about this suspect, Cole Thomas Allen. According to the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, at the moment, he is not cooperating with investigators, though they have been able to piece together his path of travel, taking train from California to Chicago to Washington, D.C., where he checked in several days ahead of time to the hotel where this event was taking place at the Washington Hilton. At this point, Allen faces 2 federal charges, including using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer with a dangerous weapon. Bonnie will we're expected to see the suspect later today. He's scheduled to be arraigned in federal court here in Washington.
What does it all mean for King Charles's visit? Will there be any security concerns surrounding that?
Well, at this point, Bonnie, actually, officials are saying that it really shouldn't impact much. There's been some reporting that maybe a few events have been tweaked here or there. But again, the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche was asked about this and said that he is confident that their trip is going to be secure. And we heard from Buckingham Palace ultimately saying that it's going to continue as scheduled. So there's a lot of highlights on this. It's going to dominate much of the week here in Washington. But Bonnie, beyond any potential security concerns, as you well know, this is really a trip to perhaps shore up ties between the UK and the US amid what has been a widening rift between President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, back in D.C., Kevin Warsh, looks like there is a possibility now that the confirmation process will start and continue because Senator Thom Tillis has dropped his blockade. What is the process looking like now, Tyler?
Well, we actually have a date for a Senate Banking Committee vote, which is this Wednesday. So that is definitely positive momentum, considering that that's been on hold. But as you mentioned, Senator Tillis coming out saying that the fact that the DOJ dropped its legal matter into Fed Chair Jerome Powell, that's enough for him, that he also got these assurances from federal prosecutors that the case is not going to resume, despite the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, saying in her post announcing that the suit was being dropped, that she still retains the authority to restart it if the facts ultimately warrant doing so. But as of now, it seems that this should be a clear guide path for Kevin Warsh's nomination. He will get that 13-11 majority on the Senate Banking Committee to then advance to a full floor, where he only needs a simple majority. Republicans hold the Senate, so that shouldn't be an issue as of now. We can quickly add, Vonnie, that President Trump was asked about this. He said he thinks Kevin Warsh's nomination will be smooth going, but he also did add that he's going to keep up the pressure on Jerome Powell, and that he himself is looking forward to that Inspector General report that is looking into the cost overruns of the Fed's renovations here in Washington. As you know, Vonnie, Powell's term as chair ends May 15th. Looks like the Senate is prepared to get Kevin Warsh confirmed before then.
Yeah, just on Fed Chair Jerome Powell. So the DOJ has ended its criminal probe targeting him, but has the president sort of dropped the idea that, you know, he's angry about how much the renovation is costing, or is there a possibility that the Fed chair could face serious problems still?
So we have to keep in mind that the DOJ's investigation was into allegations that Powell misled Congress about those cost overruns, that there was some sort of criminal conduct when he appeared in front of the Senate Banking Committee last June to answer questions about it, which is why you saw a lot of members on the Banking Committee raise concerns. I've spoken to a lot of them that they didn't think that what Powell did rose to the level of criminal conduct. Instead, they'll say that he was unprepared in that testimony. That was a separate matter. That is what the DOJ has dropped. Instead, there is an Inspector General investigation, or review, rather, that Jerome Powell asked to be done by the Fed's watchdog to look into these cost overruns. That isn't something that would yield the same sort of consequences that a Department of Justice criminal investigation would. But President Trump is still keeping up the pressure that he wants to see that report, considering that we do know that costs have ballooned when it comes to that project here in Washington.
Absolutely. Tyler, thank you so much. That is Tyler Kendall there from Washington, D.C. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. China has blocked Meta's $2 billion acquisition of AI startup Mateos. The country's National Development and Reform Commission announced the decision in a one-line notice, saying the move was made in accordance with laws and regulations. It didn't elaborate further. Meta didn't immediately respond to requests for comment. Meantime, DeepSeek is pitching aggressively low prices, offering a 75% discount for its new AI model. The move intensifies competition across China's AI industry and could reignite a price war. And HSBC is reviewing a long-standing perk that covers around 95% of school fees for children of its Hong Kong bankers. Hong Kong is HSBC's largest market and is the only major hub where mid-level staff and above are entitled to the subsidy. Coming up, Mark McCormick of BMO Capital Markets sees a macro regime shift away from Goldilocks. He's joining us next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. Investors gearing up for a big week of rate decisions. Here's what the week looks like. Bank of Japan on Tuesday, the Fed on Wednesday, and the ECB and the BOE on Thursday. Joining us now is Mark McCormick, Chief FX Strategist at BMO Capital Markets. So just broadly, Mark, are you expecting any surprises from any of these central banks this week?
No, I don't think you're going to see any surprises at all. I think the market thought the BOJ could move, and again, I think this one's much more focused on what the politics are and whether or not the government wants to see the BOJ move that quickly. So I think BOJ is on the sidelines. I think ECB and Bank of England, they're going to try to maintain a language that they keep hikes on the table, but I don't think it's very clear that they're going to hike, and I don't think there's any need for them to hike. And I think at the very least, if they do hike, it's going to be seen as a policy mistake, which will not be good for the growth outlook, in turn won't be good for the currencies. And I think the Fed is the one that I think is the most interesting because it's the most mispriced, in my opinion. But again, I think what they're going to do is just kind of stay the course and follow the data and kind of stay in line with where the data expectations go. and that's going to drive policy decisions.
So explain why you think there's a mispricing. There is a bias towards easing still in this market. Is that unwarranted?
I believe it is. I think partly if you look at the element of a terms of trade shock is going to benefit the U.S. economy relative to others. And I think, again, at the same time, when we look at our economic indicators that we use to track the movements of currencies and other asset classes and asset allocation decisions, the U.S. is actually coming in a very good position. Data surprise has been deteriorating a little bit, but the U.S. has very strong economic momentum across the data. And we've also seen the market kind of upgrade their views on the outlook for the economy over the coming year. So relative to other G10 currencies, particularly in Europe, the U.S. looks really strong here. So when I see kind of what's going on in rates, when I see the market basically pricing in very aggressive rate hikes from the Bank of England and the ECB, this does not match what the outcome should be. So the outcome should be is the Fed should be on hold. You should price out the cuts. And if one central bank's going to hike and they're going to do it because of good economic reasons, it's going to be the Fed. So that's not what's being priced in the markets. That's not our view. But I think the volatility around what the outlook is for central banks and how you look at front end pricing is going to be much more important for the markets moving forward.
Yeah, if all that pans out, that would be a massive repricing across the board, Mark. So are you saying that there's no need to be concerned about the US labor market? There isn't a huge AI reckoning coming, and we don't really need to be that concerned either about $107 a barrel Brent?
So I think what we need to be worried about, especially with AI, is before it becomes deflationary, we know it's inflationary. We know that it drives electricity prices higher. We know that the energy grid is not capable of maintaining the demand that's going to be pulled from it for data centers and for AI usage. So we do know initially that AI is going to be inflationary. The element that it could be deflationary is really a theory. It's something that markets are going to focus on. There's really no clear consensus. We have to see how this plays out. But the labor market, when you look at the economic data and you look at the labor market itself, it seems to be holding up. It seems to be resilient. So the point that I would make is you just do not need this aggressive easing in financial conditions in the U.S. that the market wants to price in, particularly when the U.S. is leading the equity markets now. It is one, when we look at how the market's traded since the start of this conflict, U.S. equity markets in tech are coming back. So again, the U.S. is pulling capital flows back in. And the market that we're involved in is a bit inflationary. So again, I think this is the one where if one central bank is going to be on hold, despite what has been a generally cooling labor market, it's going to be the U.S. economy, it's going to be the Fed that doesn't need to see rate cuts.
Mark, would you change your mind if Kevin Warsh were to be confirmed in fairly short order? Would you then see a reason for an easing bias?
Not at all. I actually think, based on his discussion last week, he's actually a lot more, it's hard to characterize someone as being hawkish or dovish just based off one speech, but I think the context of the discussion was hawkish. And I think the market, again, wants to ignore that. I think the market's focused on a lot of dislocations. The first one being essentially the second derivative of the conflict. The conflict is essentially, in the market's expectations, is winding down. The tail risks are reducing, but the macro shocks are just starting because there's a sequencing effect. So I think when I bring it back to Warsh, I think he's going to be what he's going to do is drive a framework for the Fed that's different. It's a regime change. But I think his underpinning of what matters to him is it's really going to be about whether or not, again, inflation in a supply-driven market is going to be something that the Fed can control. And again, the impact of supply and demand mismatch of what we're seeing, again, we're dealing with supply side shocks since COVID. And again, to think about what impact the Fed could have on that by cutting rates, I think is not clear. So you bring it back to it, the first order effect of what we're going to be focused on here is inflation. And again, what we're seeing in our economic indicators that we run for FX is that the U.S. economic demand cycle is still relatively strong. So I would say I don't see Warsh coming in as being a bias going to be built in that's going to favor what the market wants to see, which is more cuts.
All right, and I guess that's all dollar positive. Mark, thanks. We have to leave it there. Really appreciate it. Mark McCormick of BMO Capital Markets. Coming up, inside a note from the gunman at the White House Correspondents Dinner, and a look at what else is making headlines in your front page news. Next, this is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. It's time now for your front page news. First up, the New York Times leading with the attack at the White House Correspondents Dinner. The Times says a man in custody wrote a note indicating potential targets and grievances. The note suggests the man was angered by the actions of the Trump administration, including what he called abuse in immigrant detention camps, lethal attacks on boats in the Caribbean, and the bombing of an elementary school in Iran. Next up, the Wall Street Journal reports a group of budget airlines, including Frontier and Avelo, is seeking $2.5 billion in government assistance in exchange for warrants that could convert into equity stakes. The ask comes as the administration is separately considering extending a lifeline to Spirit Airlines to help avoid liquidation. And finally, the Washington Post reporting utility companies shut off Americans' power to 13.4 million times, in fact, in 2024, and gas 1.7 million times. According to a federal report, the disconnections were most frequent in the South, with Oklahoma having the highest rate. Consumer advocates say the numbers signal a high rate of extreme financial distress among U.S. households. Let's take a look at these markets in your Monday session. It looks like S&P futures are pointed to a lower open. A weaker day for the dollar as well as we get set for a huge week of central bank decisions. And the 10-year yield at 4.31, a small bit of bullish steepening. Coming up, we're going to be speaking with Isabelle, Mateos, Lago. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. A new proposal. Iran has reportedly offered the U.S. a plan for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. Official talks still at a stalemate. Clearing the path. Senator Thom Tillis drops his blockade of Kevin Warsh's confirmation for Fed chair. And a busy week of central bank decisions ahead. Also more than $28 trillion in U.S. market cap set to report earnings. So, how are we heading into the Monday trade? Well, Brent crude is now above $108 a barrel, so up almost 3%. That's a sixth day of gains if this continues. WTI above $96 a barrel. Goldman Sachs lifting its fourth quarter forecast now to $90 a barrel, up from $80, and in fact up a whole $30 since before the Hormuz shock. Morgan Stanley was already at $90 a barrel price target for Q4. If you look at the two-year yield, not seeing much movement today, but we are seeing a little bullish steepening in treasuries. Of course, this as hopes sort of gain that Kevin Warsh will be nominated, and pretty quickly the 2-cent spread now back at 52 basis points. And then let's take a look at futures because they are pointed lower for the S&P 500, not so much for the Nasdaq 100. We've lots of Mag 7 on tap this week, their earnings and the hyperscaler earnings, most of them on Wednesday. The SOX is up 39% this month, by the way, so we'll be looking for anything like margin compression or anything like that to put a cap on recent rallies. The dollar index touch weaker today. Let's get to some individual movers now. Here's Chloe Malley in London. Chloe.
Good morning, Vonnie. Sun Pharma is buying the women's healthcare company Organon in a $12 billion deal. So this will give Sun Pharma access to new innovative therapies and also expand its global reach. And for Organon, we are seeing that reflected in a big boost in the shares this morning, up more than 15% in pre-market trading. Moving on to Qualcomm, which is also in the green today after a report that OpenAI is set to collaborate with the chip maker alongside other companies to develop an AI-first mobile phone. And so we are seeing a lot of optimism around this potential collaboration, and that is really translated in the shares this morning, up quite strongly, almost 10% this morning. And finally, GE Vernova is down after being downgraded by BNP Paribas analysts, which have said that the growth momentum will be hard to sustain in gas turbines because most of the capacity has already been contracted through to 2030. And so there's limited scope now for that growth. And so we are down almost 2% on the back of that downgrade.
Chloe, thank you so much. As always, Chloe Malley there for us in London. Isabelle, Mateos, Lago of BNP Paribas looking ahead to the Fed's rate decision this week, writing, quote, with fears about the labour market easing and heightened inflation risks, the FOMC is likely to drop its easing bias and adopt a more symmetrical posture whereby its next move could be either a cut or a hike. In the near term, we consider the risk of a hike to be greater than that of a cut. Isabelle joins us now. She's Group Chief Economist at BNP Paribas. The team has revised up their inflation forecast for the US to 3.3% this year. Isabelle, is this primarily energy costs and the knock-on effects? And how bad could it get?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. Obviously, the energy shock is an important part of the picture, but it's also the fact that the economy is looking pretty strong. And so there's not going to be, we expect, economic weakness or demand weakness restricting very much the ability of be it workers or companies to pass on these energy price increases. Moreover, this comes on top of the tariff shock, which had not been yet fully absorbed by consumers, hadn't been yet fully passed through, as Chair Powell stressed at the last FOMC meeting. So there's quite a bit of inflationary pressures coming through the pipe, and not much by way of demand restricting the pricing power of economic agents. And so that's why we expect inflation to reaccelerate, and that's why the Fed needs to be very cautious in its messaging and its posturing.
Yeah, Isabelle, why are we not seeing more demand destruction so far? I mean, we're 2 months in now. It's not like we got that much relief from oil prices, and certainly in the last few days, I mean, we're on day 6 now of gains once again.
Well, exactly. That's exactly why you're seeing the price gain, right? Because we're not at much demand destruction. And also, look, people have these price references in their head. They compare today's price level to the 70s or even to 2022. But let's not forget, the price of everything else has gone up as well. And so in real terms, the price levels for whether it be crude oil or price at the pump are not that high, and by most estimates, the kind of price of crude that you would need to see proper demand destruction is closer to 150 and above. So we're not there. I very much hope we don't get there, but that's why so far the impact, whether on oil demand or actually even activity, has been relatively modest.
So 160 and above, and would that have to be for a protracted period of time, Isabelle?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if it goes there for one day and then crashes, that's not much of an issue. But yeah, you would need to see oil at that level for a protracted period. And frankly, look, the scenarios at this stage are relatively bifurcated. Either in the coming weeks, the Strait of Hormuz is reopened and oil starts flowing again. We're not going to get back to normal in a matter of days or weeks, but at least, then it would contain the rise in oil prices, say, on annual average to $80 or $90 per barrel, or the situation drags on, the Strait of Hormuz remains shut, and very quickly we start running into physical shortages and much higher prices for energy. And so it's not going to be a straight line from 90 to 150 or 100. At some point, if it becomes clear we're in the worst case scenario, then prices will spike and we'll see a much bigger impact on activity and indeed demand destruction.
Yes. What's your base case now on a Kevin Warsh confirmation, Isabelle?
It seems a pretty straightforward story at this stage. I understand the Banking Committee is due to vote on his nomination on Wednesday. There's no reason to expect that this wouldn't go through now that Senator Tillis has said he would vote for his confirmation. And so, in principle, Kevin Warsh should be fully confirmed by the time that Jerome Powell's term as chair ends on May 15. There's leaves plenty of time, basically 2 weeks for the full Senate to confirm him. So I don't expect any surprises there.
Now, do you have any inclination at all that Kevin Warsh will be looking to gather support maybe for a rate cut at some point, or at least for quantitative tightening?
So look, we know what his agenda is. He wants to cut rates, he wants to shrink the balance sheets, and he wants to change very in depth the way the Fed communicates, I think some of these elements are going to find more support than others. So he's going to have to a little bit pick his battles. As far as rate cuts go, he's gotten cover even from Secretary Bessent last week saying, look, in the circumstances, maybe it's going to take a bit of time before rate cuts become appropriate. So I would be surprised, frankly, if he tried to push that particular change through immediately, given the inflationary pressures that we've been talking about. And instead, it should be he should find less resistance in the discussion around how does the Fed communicate, what kind of data and models do we use, and indeed starting the conversation on the balance sheet, even though that will not be quick either. But I don't expect that, he will take the risk of pressing hard for a rate cut from the get-go and risking being in a minority on the FOMC. That would be a strange way to start.
All right, Isabelle, thank you so much. Very appreciate the conversation. Isabelle Mateos, Lago of BNP Paribas joining us. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. HSBC is reviewing a long-standing perk that covers around 95% of school fees for children of its Hong Kong bankers. Hong Kong is HSBC's largest market and is the only major hub where mid-level staff and above are entitled to the subsidy. A top DOJ official has demanded that the National Trust for Historic Preservation drops its legal challenge to President Trump's White House ballroom project. He says the lawsuit puts the president's life at risk, citing the attempted shooting at the White House Correspondents Dinner. The official added that a completed ballroom would allow the president to attend large gatherings without leaving the White House. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth says Venezuelan oil policy is moving in the right direction to attract foreign investment, but still needs some work. Weeks after President Maduro's toppling, Venezuela changed its nationalist oil policy to entice foreign investors. But Wirth says production needs to increase. Coming up, Iran reportedly proposes a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The latest from the Middle East next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Iran has offered the U.S. a new proposal for reaching a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz. This is according to Axios. The deal includes Tehran reopening the strait in exchange for the end of the blockade of Iranian ports on the part of the U.S. Now, the U.S. has yet to comment. Jumana Bersecci is back with us from Dubai. Jumana, take us through the details that we know of in this proposal.
Well, Vonnie, on the surface level, this looks like the Iranians are coming back to the U.S. and saying, we will be willing to lift our blockade if you lift your blockades, i.e. they would have to do it at the same time. But actually, what Iranian state media is reporting, that is not the only condition that Iran has set. They've also talked about including a new legal framework for Hormuz, compensation for damage from the war, and guarantees against further military action, just to proceed to the next round of discussions, after which they say they'll be willing to have conversations about the nuclear files. So the way this is being presented probably is a bit of a non-starter as far as the U.S. is concerned, not least because President Trump, even over the weekend, he gave an interview to Fox and he was saying that the U.S. naval blockade is actually quite successful and that it is curtailing Iranian oil exports, and that he expects in the next couple of days that Iranian storage capacity will reach its limits. After which there is a feeling, at least, that the Iranian side will be hurting so much economically that they'll be more incentivized to come to the negotiating table. So that is the view from the U.S. And I should say that what Iran has presented over the course of the weekend, and it has been a big weekend for diplomacy for the Iranian foreign minister, traveling to Islamabad, going to Oman, back to Islamabad, now he's in Russia as well, presenting their side. But we haven't heard from the U.S. yet. Axios is saying there will be a situation room briefing later this afternoon. But the way the conditions are being presented as of now from Iran seem unlikely to fly with the U.S. in order to proceed to the next round of negotiations. So essentially, the stalemate is still there around the Straits.
Yeah, and presumably that's why we're seeing oil rise for a sixth day once again, right, Jumana? Now, Araghchi, as you said, is in Russia at the moment. Why is he coordinating with Moscow? What is his reason for being there?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting question because you can't say that Russia are a neutral mediator here, Vonnie. And actually, throughout the course of this war, there have been multiple reports suggesting that that Russia has actually aided Iran with surveillance technology, with drone technology, with intelligence as well, tracking down where key U.S. assets are in the region. So they're not a neutral counterparty over here. And at the same time, economically, Russia has emerged as one of the major winners of this war because of the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, higher oil prices, the lifting of those U.S. Sanctions on Russian oil, at least temporarily. But it is interesting to note that the foreign minister of Iran has been making this big push around the region, not just in Pakistan and Oman obviously have a vested interest in the strait as well, but with Russia too. And you have to think that with Russia, no matter what happens here, if there is a further round of confrontation, they will likely be involved too, in terms of what I was just describing before, intelligence assistance. And even if there is a diplomatic resolution, they will likely be involved as well. So it is a part and parcel of Iran's attempt to perhaps bring up more allies on their side once these conversations and negotiations with the U.S. kick off again.
All right, well, we'll see what the U.S. has to say next. Jumana, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. That's Jumana Bersechi in Dubai. In Washington, President Trump speaks out after shots were fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend.
Well, what happened is it was a little bit me. I wanted to see what was happening, and I wasn't making it that easy for him. I wanted to see what was going on. And by that time, we started to realize maybe it was a bad problem, different kind of a problem, bad one, and different than what would be normal noise from a ballroom, which you hear all the time. And I was surrounded by great people.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall is back with us from Washington. Tyler, what's the latest on the investigation, and is President Trump curtailing any activities?
Well, Vonnie, at this point, no, President Trump is saying that actually he wants to see the White House Correspondents' Dinner be rescheduled within 30 days. We're not expecting much to really change in terms of his activities due to this event. Now, the investigation is in its preliminary stages, though the evidence so far has suggested that the suspect was indeed targeting Trump administration officials. In fact, a manifesto seen by Bloomberg News shows that the suspect wrote that President Trump was a, quote, traitor. Now, Cole Thomas Allen, the name of the suspect, he's currently facing 2 federal charges. He's expected to be arraigned here in Washington in federal court later today. But we did hear from the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, who actually was at that dinner, who said that she does expect more charges to be added as the investigation unfolds. We're starting to piece together a little bit about how this came to be, including that the suspect traveled by train from California to Chicago and then to Washington before he checked into the Washington Hilton, where this event was taking place, actually several days ahead of time. Vonnie, it is raising questions, though, broadly speaking, about security, including at this event, which happens annually every year in basically the same way in terms of security protocol, though we can say that the Secret Service has defended its actions, and President Trump did applaud how those agents responded.
Well, King Charles is heading to Washington. It hasn't affected that particular visit. Let's move on to Kevin Warsh, because it looks like his confirmation might be pretty smooth sailing at this point now that Thom Tillis is backing the vote. What's the process now, Tyler?
Well, that's certainly the hope by Republicans, Vonnie, because we know that Jerome Powell's term as chair ends on May 15th. So they want to get this process going to ensure that Kevin Warsh can be in place ahead of then or in time for then. So what's going to happen this week on Wednesday? The Senate Banking Committee already has its planned vote. Kevin Warsh is expected to get to the 13-11 majority of Republicans on that committee. That will then advance his nomination to the full Senate floor. There hasn't been a full date set for that, but we would expect it to happen rather quickly, and he'll get that simple majority if all goes as planned.
Tyler, thank you so much. That's Tyler Kendall for us in Washington, D.C. Turning to technology, China ordering to cancel Meta's $2 billion acquisition of agentic AI startup Manus. We are getting an emailed statement from Meta now saying that everything was in accordance with all the rules and it doesn't expect to see any more difficulty. But let's get more from Matt Bloxham of Bloomberg Intelligence. Give us the background to this story, Matt, and why China might have a problem.
Yeah, so Manos, as you said, is an agentic AI startup, and as we know, the world is shifting very rapidly towards agentic AI as a kind of near-term future of that technology. And yeah, it's an area that Meta's been looking to kind of boost its capabilities. Now, Manos was originally a Chinese-founded business, and it reincorporated in Singapore, but it's got Chinese founders, and those Chinese founders are in China, and they're being blocked from leaving the country. So I think clearly, this is an issue about technology transfer from one superpower to another, and that's why we're seeing this Chinese clampdown. To be honest, it was a little bit surprising that this deal had been waved through initially, so it's not a big surprise that there's been this kind of pushback. I think it is a story that's going to kind of bounce around for quite a while, but I think given that China is essentially blocked these founders from leaving the country, there's going to be a huge amount of pressure for them to kind of roll back on the deal.
Yeah, and again, Meta out with an emailed statement saying it completed the Manos transaction fully and in accordance with applicable law and anticipates a resolution to the probe. Staying in China, DeepSeek has slashed fees for its new AI model. A Chinese price war underway, I guess, Matt. Will this entice people to use, DeepSeek's new model, or do Silicon Valley models still just far outpace the DeepSeek fresh model?
Yeah, so this is the version 4. So I think in performance-wise, it is comparable to the kind of the US models. But I think what's going on more here is a huge rivalry in China between a whole raft of different AI models, and they need to encourage the developers to use this so they adopt it kind of going forward. So we're seeing discounts of up to 75% on the regular sticker price for the kind of the Pro API version. It's a short-term deal, but it's designed very much to get developers to engage it and then use it in preference over some of the other Chinese models like Qwen, for example.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. We'll continue to watch the DeepSeek story. That's Matt Bloxham of Bloomberg Intelligence. Coming up, it's a marathon this week, rate decisions and earnings. And your week ahead next, this is Bloomberg. So a busy week of earnings and, of course, central bank decisions ahead. Starting off with a Bank of Japan rate decision Tuesday. Then it's the Fed's turn Wednesday. Plus, we also get earnings from Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta and Amazon among those reporting Wednesday. And then decisions from the European Central Bank and the Bank of England on Thursday. And in the US Thursday, we'll get a fresh inflation print and also results from Apple. No one's taking holidays this week, that's for sure. All right, a few micro movers pre-market. Qualcomm higher. Business Standard reporting that OpenAI is exploring an AI phone in partnership with Qualcomm, MediaTek and Lookshare. Organon up more than 15%. Sun Pharma is looking to buy the New Jersey-based company in a $12 billion deal. And CrowdStrike has been upgraded to outperform at Mizuho Securities. Price target of $520, so another little bit to go. Here's your macro picture for the day. Futures wavering, dollar weaker, yields slightly higher. That's it for Bloomberg Brief.